Hello and welcome to Headliners. It's your first look at Thursday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle. I'm joined tonight by two comedians from opposing ends of the spectrum. I won't say which spectrum. It's Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. Are you both happy and full of joy?
No.
No? And why is that, Lewis?
You don't want to hear it. Nobody wants to hear about family problems, how your wife is like, your girlfriend is like just...
This is the problem with you, Lewis. When people say to you, how are you? It's just a pleasantry. And you go off on a big lecture.
Well,
they don't care.
I'm punishing them for not caring about me.
Nick, are you happy?
I'm great. I've just been on a holiday.
Yes, where did you go?
Oh, nowhere.
Nowhere is the best
My
destination.
holiday was typical, Andrew. I, did weights, 5-mile runs. I read about cyclical history theory and the inevitability of civilizational collapse. Just a normal holiday.
What a lovely holiday. You should try a John Grisham, though. Anyway, let's move on and have a look at the front covers of Thursday's newspapers. We've got the Daily Mail, who are leading with super yacht hope lost as divers find 5 bodies. The Daily Telegraph is running with Alzheimer's wonder drug is given the go-ahead. And The Guardian has UK police threaten extraditions to tackle sextortion criminals. The Eye has got Labour has no real plan to fix UK sewage crisis. Sharkey warns that'll be Fergal Sharkey of the undertones. The Times has got divers find 5 bodies in wreck of super yacht. Finally, the Daily Star, some nonsense about a python and a toilet. Those were your front pages. OK, so we're going to kick off with Thursday's Daily Mail, the front cover of which has what treats in store?
It's the Daily Mail. It's good news in the Daily Mail. Super yacht hope lost. Oh, no, it's not good news.
The opposite, really.
It's the opposite of good news. Well, but you might consider it good news. This guy, Mike Lynch, was a very big shot. He founded Autonomy, which was one of those British success stories.
Yes.
And he sold it to Hewlett-Packard, I think, for like $8 billion. And then they looked at the books and they found out that it wasn't worth very much, according to Hewlett-Packard. So they arrested him and they had a whole big extradition thing. And then he came across as being a winner.
You haven't really explained the story.
He was celebrating this victory. You're going to find out who the guy is. If he's somebody, don't you have to explain who the guy is?
I think we've got the gist of who he is.
He won his court case in America.
Yes.
And then he was on a yacht in the Mediterranean.
Yes.
And there was a water spout, or as we would call it in America, a tornado. And 80% of all water spouts and tornadoes are in America. Did you know that?
I did not know that. So this is a wreckage. Nick, do you have anything to add, maybe to clarify?
I mean, there's an element of conspiracy because he was in this multi-billion-dollar fraud case. His co-defendant was this guy, Stephen Chamberlain. He died being hit by a car out jogging, which, to be fair, I'm not making any claims. It's one of the most House of Cards sort of dodgy ways to go, isn't it?
But a lot of people do die that way. I mean,
well, people are saying because this guy dies on a yacht at the same time as that, people are asking questions on the internet, Andrew,
They will do inevitably, though, won't they? I mean, there's pretty much nothing that can happen these days that isn't put down to conspiracies.
Well, being hit by a car, first of all, the guy was running, and you should not running. It's totally unsafe, even if you're not hit by a car.
Especially if you've just been in a massive multi-billion fraud case.
And that you've just won, and you're probably just so happy. Why would you go running anyway?
Well, let's move on before Lewis takes us down a particularly deep rabbit hole. We're going to go to the front page of Thursday's Guardian. Nick, what have they got?
They've got UK police threaten extraditions to tackle sextortion criminals.
What is sextortion?
It's this horrible thing where you trick, for example, teenagers into sending intimate pictures of them, and then you blackmail them of themselves, then you blackmail them.
Yes.
And in 2 cases, people have actually killed themselves related to this, or probably many cases, but they mentioned 2 here. So it's absolutely disgusting. And what they're saying is a lot of this happens in West Africa, but they're saying you're not safe from prosecution because we're going to try and extradite you if you keep doing this. And actually, this is good. And normally, the Guardian's rubbish, but this is actually good because something needs to happen because it is a horrible, horrible thing.
And it must be tricky to track down these people. I suppose they can do it through the IP address and that kind of thing, but it still must be quite tricky. But this is a very common thing now, isn't it? People sort of manipulating and tricking people into sexual activity online or whatever it might be.
I think it's always been this way.
Yeah.
But I think the worst thing about it is, and Nick hasn't really pointed it out, it's just the government of this country now, the Labour government. They want to go to everywhere in the entire world, and they want to go everywhere and just sue and just arrest people.
But this is for an actual crime. I mean, the government were talking about we're going to tackle people like Elon Musk for supposedly stirring racial hatred on the basis of very little evidence, as far as I can see. But that's different. That's them trying to police the world's language. But this is about an actual crime.
And this is people killing our teenagers. A guy in South London, there was a guy in Dunblane. These are foreign people tricking teenagers into killing themselves. So it's a very different proposition.
I'm not saying I'm against it. I wouldn't be against it if they treated, if they weren't doing what they're doing. Keir Starmer is one of the most malevolent forces.
One of the most malevolent forces.
You should see my tweet. I've done a whole.
You don't think it's incompetence rather than malevolence?
No.
Well, you know what Ben Shapiro always says: you got to believe it's incompetence first. You go with incompetent first.
I think that's right.
I don't think he is. I think he's a commie.
Well, I mean, he is a Trotskyist.
He is Stalin.
There's no getting around that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the.
I haven't read Nick's tweet.
You should. Many people are talking about.
Well, let's not publicise tweets at the moment, because I did a very good one about Dashan the other day.
Oh.
Let's move on though to the cover of the Telegraph on Thursday. What we got?
Alzheimer's wonder drug is given the go-ahead, and this is in the Daily Telegraph, which is not the Times. The Times is the country's largest drug pusher, and they want to push drugs. This is a $26,000 a year drugs to eliminate or to reduce the amyloid proteins in the brain.
But this is a news story, Lewis, about this breakthrough drug.
Yes.
Any allegation that you're suggesting that the drug company has paid the Telegraph to promote this is just simply unfounded.
No, I'm not saying that. I didn't say that they're paid to it. I think.
Well, you insinuated quite strongly.
No, I think they're all in it together. They're all the whole thing. The press,
well, that's all right then.
No,
it's just a massive conspiracy.
Yes, I would say this is a conspiracy. Yeah, they're all in it together.
They're all in it.
Isn't this just rather good news? That if there is a drug, because Alzheimer's is a horrible condition, and if there is a drug that could potentially help people in this terrible situation.
It is not good news.
Why?
Because number one, first of all, any of these drugs are not good news. This drug has side effects of brain swelling and bleeding. It costs
all drugs have side effects.
Yes, exactly, which is why there should be no drugs. I'm sounding right. You know what? I'm
Nick,
so mad at you.
Should there be no... You're so mad at me. What are you mad at me
You're mad at me by, like, no other host asks the questions like you're asking. They don't get to the bottom of it. They just go, oh, Lewis is being funny. And then they let it go. But
so I'm making a mistake by probing a little too much.
Yeah, maybe.
You don't like being probed.
Well, I didn't say that.
Where do you think his adverse reaction to the drugs came from?
Well, there we go.
It was
there we go.
But
then, Nick, you know, Alzheimer's does affect a lot of people. It's really horrible.
Of course, yeah, and there's a 27% decline it showed in sufferers, so that's massive. And yeah, the brain swelling didn't sound great, but if it can make a difference, horrible disease. So yes, I think it is actually good news.
It's one of those things, isn't it, that you do take the risk. You know, if there are risky side effects, if you have a condition of that severity, you do.
People were put off by the obscene pushing of this sort of questionable vaccine during COVID, but you know, I think. It doesn't mean all medicines don't work, which is Lewis's position.
Well, Lewis,
but can I just say...
You also say you shouldn't wash your hair or brush your teeth.
I don't think you should. No, you don't need to. When you eat an all-meat diet, you don't need to brush your teeth or wash
some
your
would disagree.
Well, people who... You're not going to... No kisses for you tonight. The point...
Oh, no.
The point is that Nick says it's a 27% decrease.
Yeah.
And is it a 27%?
It's not really my idea.
Is it a 27% from the relative risk or whatever the other risk is? We don't know what the real... You're thinking 27%, that's huge. But it could be just an ever so slight, like with the way cholesterol drugs work, which is minor.
27% sounds like quite a lot.
I know, that's what they do. It's probably a lie.
I think
26,000
I think it sounds pretty good to me. We're going to move on to this. This is the Daily Star. Utter nonsense, as usual.
Well, it's Python bit my ghoulies while I was on the bog, but now I'll get to the story, which is... which I hate these stories because as long as you try and forget them, because as long as you remember them, you can't actually go to the loo because you're thinking about a python coming out.
No, but what country is this in? Because if it's some exotic country where...
It could, well, they have pythons in Scotland.
I think there are some pythons in Inverness, or is that monster? Some kind of monster?
This is in Inverness.
Is it
doesn't say because it's on you haven't got the whole story.
We don't know what the story is.
The thing is, pythons do not linger in toilets. They wouldn't enjoy that.
Well, I think they would drown, aren't they, underwater?
It's in and out, and it's not lingering. It gets in and out. It does the job.
But are they underwater? The toilet is in the water.
This is one of the oldest urban myths, that there are snakes and crocodiles in the toilet and that kind of thing. The Daily Star must really be desperate at the moment, just recycling these urban myths.
You know what? I believe this way more than I believe anything in the Daily Telegraph. Well, this actually makes sense.
We've solved the issue of prison overcrowding. we're giving up on arresting people.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think we're giving up arresting people. We're just giving up on arresting some people.
Yeah.
Police fear further action to tackle prison overcrowding will leave them, the police, unable to make arrests. If basically what's
Operation Brinker?
Operation Brinker is arresting people who've just spoken their minds. They're supposed to.
So basically, they want to free up all this space in the prisons for people who've sent mean tweets.
Right, 1,000 of them, whatever. I mean, the prison system is so minuscule in this country. I think it's 89,000 places, maybe 100,000. In America, they got 2.5 million, but they make money off of it.
Why don't they just put all the people who've sent mean tweets on an island or something like that?
Yeah, call that island Britain and say there's freedom. But they're not doing it.
They're not going to do that, Lewis. That would be mad. Nick, are you troubled by this?
I'm very troubled by it. I mean, maybe if you want to solve the prison problem, don't have political prisoners would be a good start. I remember a while ago, I made I said a phrase that became famous on the show, the apotheosis of anarcho-tyranny. But I spoke too soon because we've reached whole new levels of anarcho-tyranny. What Starmer's doing, as we all know, he's putting enemies of the regime in prison for absurd lengths of time.
Yeah.
These 3-year sentences and so on, no suspended, go directly to jail. And he's letting out criminals. It's Operation Joker, they should call it. It's what the Joker or Bane would do in Batman. Let's let out the criminals, put in the political prisoners.
Yeah.
It's obscene.
You know what's troubling about this as well? You know, I've spoken to Americans about it. Americans don't get this. They don't get why, even if you say some really horrible and offensive, why on earth would the police be knocking on your door?
Yeah.
It just doesn't fit in their mindset. And it shouldn't fit in ours either. You know, we're meant to be a free society. And yes, these people are saying horrible things, but the idea of them, and the other thing about this is they're not pleading guilty because they know that, they are pleading guilty. They're pleading guilty because they know they'll be on remand for heaven knows how long.
They'll end up serving less time. It'll be quicker.
And until someone pleads not guilty and takes it all the way to the higher courts, this will go on and on. But a lot of these people are economically underprivileged, and they can't afford to do that.
What do they call that when you put somebody in prison? Say we're not letting you out until you admit that you've done it.
Yeah.
People don't want to be in prison. Whatever.
It's called tyranny.
Yes, it's called tyranny.
The Soviet Union.
It's called tyranny. I can say this because I don't care. I'm 67. I don't care about my career. But this guy Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, this is the most evil thing. The country.
But what I would say to that, Lewis, is that these laws have been on the statute books for quite some time. The Tories did absolutely nothing, but the Tories were supportive of this kind of hate speech law. And they were supportive of clamping down on protests. You know, this is not a partisan issue. I just think that Labour is taking all of the Tories' worst ideas and ramping them up to 11.
I agree with you. And someone should call in, you know, it should go to the Supreme Court. This is a First Amendment violation, and people have the Second Amendment here, so they can.
But we have a Supreme Court that was set up by New Labour, which doesn't necessarily have the.
And then what about the First Amendment?
We don't have it. We have an uncodified constitution that is based on precedent.
What does that mean?
Feeling very uncodified right now.
If it's uncodified, it means this country does not have a constitution. In an earlier period,
you're dominating too much, Lewis. In an earlier period, in an earlier period of the neocons, they would send in troops to try and install democracy in this country. Don't you think? Your country would send in people that say, we need to try and get democracy in this, because Starmer's completely anti-democratic, as we know.
It's very, very